A decorated Navy SEAL sniper walked into court as a witness and walked out in handcuffs. Her only crime, existing while black in America. A Navy SEAL sniper found herself restrained in courthouse handcuffs, not for any wrongdoing, but because authorities couldn't accept her identity. San Diego County Superior Court. Tuesday morning. The outside air felt crisp and dry after overnight rainfall, but by 9 a.m., the California sun had resumed its relentless burning. Naomi Prescott exited her rental vehicle dressed in dark denim, a simple black top, and her military-issued timepiece. Her hair was pulled into a precise, elevated braid. No cosmetics, just her authentic self. Her movement carried quiet intention, like someone trained to eliminate unnecessary motion. While not deliberately intimidating, she possessed a composed stillness that naturally caused others to step aside. Yet, the moment she crossed the courthouse threshold that morning, trouble began. A security officer whispered to his partner. Naomi observed. Awareness had been drilled into her long before she'd ever handled sniper equipment. At the security station, "Ma'am, your watch and belt need removal," the first officer stated. "No belt present," she responded evenly. "This timepiece stays on military property. Removal is required," he insisted, raising his voice. She complied without argument, slowly unfastening it and placing it in the container. He examined the engraved inscription, USS Hopper Bravo Detachment 0105. Then he truly studied her. "Military service?" "Affirmative," she answered simply. "Which service?" "Naval. Currently serving? Lieutenant Commander." He laughed dismissively. "Doesn't appear that way." Naomi remained unflinching, maintaining steady eye contact. "I'm here for my brother's court appearance. I'm testifying." He nodded slowly, but she sensed his mental calculations. By the time security clearance finished, a bailiff, Caucasian, late 50s, with a freshly polished badge, was already observing her from the corridor. Naomi passed him silently and took a seat outside courtroom 3A. Within 30 seconds, he approached. "Ma'am, identification required." She presented her military documents. He frowned. "This isn't military property. Any legitimate identification." "Those are legitimate credentials." "Please stand." "I'm not under detention," she stated calmly. "I said stand up." She met his gaze. "I'm a federal witness. You can verify with—" He interrupted. "Get up immediately." His hand moved toward restraints. She remained motionless. "I don't want escalation, but your actions aren't following protocol." Onlookers had gathered. The receptionist peered through glass. A teenager retrieved his phone. The bailiff moved closer. "Either cooperate easily or I'll force compliance. Your decision." Before she could respond, he spun her around. Cold metal clicked around her wrists. Shocked gasps filled the hallway. She offered no resistance, didn't raise her voice, but humiliation and fury pierced her like shrapnel. There she stood, publicly restrained back against the wall, arms secured behind her, identification badge on the floor. Naomi Prescott stood motionless. No tears, no shouting, just standing. Every stare felt like it burned through her. But she endured. When the bailiff muttered, "That's what I expected," she didn't react. She'd heard far worse, but inside that courtroom the real tempest was building. Inside courtroom 3A, proceedings were already delayed. Naomi's younger brother Darius sat with his public defender, appearing sleepless. 24 years old, too intelligent for his poor choices, too angry to admit when help was needed. He turned, expecting Naomi's entrance. She'd promised attendance. Instead, the bailiff entered, escorting the handcuffed Naomi. Complete silence fell. Even the judge, heavy-set 60s with age spots and thick lenses, looked up confused. Explain this situation, he demanded. The bailiff cleared his throat. Brought in a suspicious individual loitering outside the courtroom, refused proper identification, claimed military status, no official civilian documents. Naomi stood tall, wrists restrained, scanning the room. Darius blinked. Wait, that's my sister. Is this accurate? The judge inquired. She's my witness, Darius confirmed. She came for me. The public defender rose quickly. Your Honor, this is Lieutenant Commander Naomi Prescott, here to provide character testimony for my client. She's active duty Navy. This is clearly a misunderstanding. The judge raised his eyebrows. Lieutenant Commander, Naomi finally spoke. Yes, sir. United States Navy SEAL Team 5. My identification was confiscated during restraint. The courtroom stirred. Someone whispered, She's a SEAL. The judge leaned back, processing the disconnect between appearance and reality. The bailiff appeared uncomfortable but maintained his grip. She wouldn't cooperate, sir, standing in the hallway, refusing appropriate identification. She presented military credentials, the public defender countered. She claims SEAL status, the bailiff snapped. Come on, I've encountered Navy SEALs previously. The judge remained silent. Naomi stepped forward. Respectfully, I don't need to match your SEAL expectations to be one. I completed BUDS in 2012, deployed 5 times. Bronze Star, Navy, and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. The Department of Defense can verify this. The judge looked at the clerk, then the bailiff, then back to Naomi. Remove the restraints. Sir Dash. Remove them immediately. The bailiff hesitated, then slowly approached and freed Naomi's wrists. The metal's click was the room's only sound. She didn't rub her wrists or flinch. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Prescott, I apologize. I wasn't informed of your advance presence. Understood, she said quietly. I wasn't expecting special treatment. Darius stood at the defense table, shaking his head. They restrained you for what? Naomi turned to him, voice low but firm. Let's just complete today. We'll discuss this later. But as she took her front row seat, tension persisted. Regardless of her medals, her attire, or her composure, someone still looked at her and thought, Who do you think you are? But the answer to that question was about to enter through the courtroom doors. The proceedings continued barely. People kept staring at Naomi, whispering, some curious, others disbelieving. A woman in the back leaned toward her companion and whispered something with a half-smile, as if she couldn't imagine someone like Naomi in any military role beyond clerical work. Naomi remained seated, spine straight, silent. Darius kept glancing at her, his leg bouncing, not from anxiety about charges, but about witnessing his sister's treatment. He wanted to speak, but knew better. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, standing with a folder. We'd like to argue that defendant Mr. Prescott presents ongoing community risk. He's already on probation for prior violations. That was a parking ticket, Darius muttered quietly, and has shown multiple instances of court order non-compliance. Naomi rose calmly. Permission to address the court, Your Honor. The judge looked up quickly. You're not a case participant. I'm the defense's primary witness. You'll speak when summoned. She held his gaze. The prosecutor turned, annoyed. Will this become a pattern today? The judge tapped his gavel once. Order, Lieutenant Commander, await your turn. Naomi didn't immediately sit, not from defiance, but because she was calculating. In her world, hesitation killed, but this wasn't Afghanistan. This was a courtroom where movement required permission. She slowly resumed her seat. A woman 2 seats away leaned in, whispering, "Are you really a sniper?" Naomi didn't acknowledge her. "She's not responding," said a man behind them. "You really think she's lying?" "I just don't understand her silence," the woman whispered. "If that were me, I'd be yelling at everyone." Naomi finally turned, making direct eye contact. "That's exactly why you're not me." The woman retreated into her seat. Court resumed, but tension hung like it was ceiling-mounted. Every time Naomi moved, people tracked her as if she might produce explosives. Every seat adjustment made the bailiff near the wall subtly adjust his belt. She noticed naturally, but didn't provide entertainment. Darius observed everything, jaw clenched. He turned to his attorney. "Why isn't anyone addressing what happened outside?" The lawyer whispered, "Because the system doesn't pause to clean up its errors. It just continues." Moments later, the judge examined a paper just handed to him. His expression shifted slightly, like something dropped inside his chest that he tried to ignore. He glanced at Naomi, then back at the document. He cleared his throat. "Before proceeding, can someone explain why there's a Department of Defense visitor listed on our docket without a timestamp?" The clerk looked up, confused. "A visitor?" The rear courtroom doors creaked open. No one spoke. Naomi turned, and in walked someone they never anticipated, especially not here. But when a 4-star admiral enters a civilian courtroom unannounced, people pay immediate attention. Initially, complete silence. Not the judge, not the attorneys, not the gallery, because when Admiral Russell Kincaid stepped through those doors, in full uniform with all medals, it was like thunder had crashed inside the courtroom. He didn't look sideways. No need. Everyone already recognized him. Tall, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, built like a linebacker who'd evolved into strategy. His presence wasn't loud, but didn't need to be. He walked directly to the front row, paused behind Naomi, then addressed the judge. "Your Honor," he said, voice low but steady. "I apologize for interrupting, but I believe one of my officers is in your courtroom." The judge appeared stunned. "Yes, Lieutenant Commander Prescott." Kincaid nodded once. "Correct. I'm here on her behalf." The prosecutor stood, clearly unsettled. "May I ask why?" "I was informed," Kincaid said without raising his voice, "that she was placed in handcuffs this morning in a public hallway without justification." No one responded. Kincaid turned to Naomi. "Are you all right, Lieutenant Commander?" "Yes, sir." "Did you resist?" "No, sir." He turned back to the judge. "And yet she was restrained like a suspect despite carrying federal credentials and being listed as a witness." The judge cleared his throat again, fumbling with his robe. "Admiral, I assure you this wasn't intentional. There was some confusion." "Confusion," Kincaid repeated, not a question, just a word dropped into the room's center like a challenge. He stepped toward the bailiff. "What was confusing about this?" The bailiff shifted. "I was performing my duties, sir. She didn't present state identification." "She's not required to. You're looking at one of this country's most qualified snipers produced in the last 2 decades. You restrained her in a hallway for sitting quietly." Naomi's eyes locked on the floor, not from shame, but because she didn't want anyone seeing the heat rising in her throat. Kincaid turned again, this time addressing the entire courtroom. "Let me state this plainly. Lieutenant Commander Prescott didn't just earn her team's position, she bled for it. She's led overseas operations, carried men twice her weight from active combat, and made shots under pressure most of us couldn't make, standing still on a calm range." Now everyone listened. He gestured gently toward Naomi. But none of that mattered out there, did it? Dead silence, because she didn't enter wearing a uniform. She entered wearing skin that made someone uncomfortable. The judge shifted uncomfortably. Admiral, we deeply regret what occurred, and I think I speak for the court when I say, I'm not requesting regret, Kincaid interrupted. I'm asking what you'll do about it. He let that hang. The courtroom was frozen. Kincaid glanced at Naomi, then gently stepped back. The judge looked rattled. Lieutenant Commander Prescott, would you be willing to continue with your testimony? Naomi stood slowly. I will, but not until the man who restrained me apologizes to me before this courtroom. All eyes turned to the bailiff. He hesitated, then wordlessly walked toward her. His face was tight, voice low. I'm sorry, ma'am. Naomi looked at him. No anger, no sarcasm, just a firm reply. Don't call me ma'am to smooth this over. You can call me Lieutenant Commander. But what Naomi was about to share in that courtroom would cut deeper than any rank ever could. The judge nodded stiffly. Lieutenant Commander Prescott, the floor is yours. Naomi stepped forward, past the defense table, past her brother, past the man who had restrained her. The silence followed her to the witness stand. She raised her right hand, swore in, sat down, then looked directly at the jury. My name is Naomi Prescott. I've served in the United States Navy for nearly 15 years. I'm a sniper with SEAL Team 5. I'm also the older sister of the man sitting at that table right there. She gestured to Darius, who didn't lift his head, not from shame, but from weight. I'm not here to cover for him, she continued. I'm here to tell you the truth. The truth about who he is, what he's done, and why he deserves a chance to do better. She took a slow breath. When our mother died, Darius was 15. I was 22. I was just starting in the Navy. I wanted to come home. I wasn't allowed to. I missed her funeral. He never forgave me for that. Her voice didn't waver, but the room's air felt tighter. After that, he started slipping. Wrong friends, wrong places, but he never stopped being smart, never stopped being good, even when he didn't know how to show it. She paused, letting silence settle. I've seen many people run from danger, she said. My brother ran into it, not on a battlefield, but in real life. He got arrested trying to stop his friend from getting jumped. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong skin. They restrained both of them. Someone in the back whispered something. Naomi ignored it. I'm not here to beg. I'm not here to blame. I'm here to ask that this court see him, not as a number or a case file or a statistic, but as a person. A man who screwed up, yes, but not someone beyond repair. She shifted slightly in her seat. You know what happens when I walk into a room in uniform? No one answered. People salute, people listen. Sometimes they even smile. But when I walk in wearing jeans, a hoodie, something changes. I become a question mark, a threat, a problem to be solved instead of a person to be understood. Naomi looked directly at the bailiff. I've been called ma'am and ma'am only when it suited the moment. The rest of the time I'm just that woman, or worse. She let it sit. But let me tell you what makes a soldier or a citizen. It's not what they wear, it's what they carry. I carry discipline, integrity, loyalty, and pain. My brother, he carries a lot too. More than you see in a police report. She paused, looked back at Darius. He was finally looking up. I'm not asking this court to erase his mistakes. I'm asking that you don't erase him. The judge stared down at the bench. The prosecutor didn't move. Even the stenographer stopped typing momentarily. The public defender spoke softly. Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. Naomi stood, her hands clenched for a second, not in anger but in control. Years of learning when to speak and when to stay quiet. This time, she chose both. She turned toward the judge. "By the way, I wasn't late this morning. I arrived early. I sat on that bench because I wanted to gather my thoughts. The only reason I walked into this courtroom in restraints is because someone made a decision based on fear, not facts." She stepped down. Admiral Kincaid gave her a slight nod. She returned it, then walked past the jury box, past the clerk, and took her seat again. No one spoke, but the silence wasn't discomfort anymore. It was respect and reckoning. The court recessed for lunch, but no one left immediately. The judge disappeared into his chambers without eye contact. The prosecutor sat motionless, flipping through the same 2 pages. Even the jury remained seated longer than usual, like they didn't want to be first to move. Naomi sat beside Darius. Neither spoke for a full minute. Then, "I didn't ask you to do all that," he said, still looking straight ahead. "I know," she replied. "I'm not a hero, Naomi." She turned to him, voice low. "Neither am I. I'm just the one who got through." He swallowed hard, hands shaking slightly. "They were going to put me in county for this." "I know," she said again, "and maybe you still have to go, but you won't go alone." Darius looked at her, searching her face for anger, disappointment, pity. He found none, just calm. "Why'd he come?" he asked. "The Admiral?" Naomi leaned back. "Because I called him." Darius raised an eyebrow. "You called a 4-star admiral to come to my hearing?" "He called me first. He heard what happened outside the courtroom, said he was already in town, told me if they're going to drag my seal through the mud, they'll have to look me in the eye when they do it." Darius gave a half laugh. "I didn't even know you had people like that." Naomi looked at him. "Neither did I until I needed them." Across the room, the bailiff stood near the exit, pretending to scroll his phone, but he wasn't fooling anyone. He kept glancing toward Naomi, not afraid anymore, just uncertain, like he was slowly realizing that the woman he'd restrained that morning had stood on more ground than he'd ever read about. Outside the courtroom, reporters were gathering. Someone must have leaked the name. It didn't take long to discover who Naomi Prescott was. Once people started asking questions, a woman from a local news station was already rehearsing her segment on the courthouse steps. Naomi saw none of it. She sat still, elbows on her knees, watching Darius fidget with his sleeve cuff like he was trying to avoid unraveling. "I didn't want you to see me like this," he muttered. Naomi didn't blink. "I've seen you at your worst, and I still came. That's what family does. Real family." He looked at her. "And what about when you're the one hurting?" She smiled for the first time all day. "Then I show up for myself the same way I showed up for you." There was a long pause between them, not heavy, not dramatic, just necessary. Then Darius leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "You think they would have restrained you if you were a white guy in uniform?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. But the real answer wasn't in words. It was in the courtroom silence and the weight of every look she'd received that morning. Naomi didn't speak much during the break, but in her head she was replaying things, not just from the morning, but from years back. Bud's training, Coronado, week 3, cold water, sand in her boots, the sound of a whistle that never came, when she wanted it and always came when she was about to catch her breath. She remembered the instructor who pulled her aside after a brutal swim. He didn't yell, didn't insult her, just looked her dead in the eye and said, "You know they didn't build this place for people like you, right?" She had nodded. She already knew. She'd always known. She made it through anyway, not because she had something to prove, but because she wasn't willing to let the world shrink her into someone she wasn't. Naomi had fought on 3 continents, provided overwatch on missions no civilian would ever hear about. She'd buried friends, worn their patches on her chest until the threads wore thin. And yet this morning, none of that mattered to that bailiff. She wasn't a leader or an operator or even a woman with a name. She was just another body on a bench. It had taken her 20 minutes to get through training drills that would break most men, but less than 20 seconds for someone to decide she didn't belong in a hallway. She wore 2 uniforms, one that came with medals, the other she was born into. And the truth was, only one of those ever seemed to matter when people looked at her. The courtroom was back in session. This time, when Naomi walked in, no one avoided eye contact. No one asked to see her identification. The bailiff stayed on the opposite end of the room. The judge cleared his throat and announced the court was reconvened. Darius stood up next to his lawyer, his voice steadier now. "Your Honor, I'd like to speak before sentencing." The judge paused, surprised, then nodded. Darius stepped forward. He didn't read from paper, didn't rehearse it in his head.
"I've spent a lot of time trying to prove I'm not what people expect me to be, and it's hard because sometimes I mess up. I get angry, I don't think. I say things I regret.
But none of that means I'm not worth something." He looked at Naomi. "My sister didn't have to come here. She didn't have to say anything. But she did because that's what she's always done. She shows up even when people don't." He turned back to the judge. "I know I messed up, but if you're going to judge me, judge all of me, not just the worst part." The room stayed still, and for the first time all day, Naomi saw something shift in the judge's face. Not regret, not guilt, just understanding. The judge leaned forward. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott. I'll take that into consideration." He looked over at Naomi. "Lieutenant Commander Prescott, this court recognizes your service, both to your country and your family." Naomi gave a slight nod. "Thank you, Your Honor." But inside, she wasn't looking for recognition. She was looking for change. Because respect after the fact is easy, but justice, real justice, shows up before the damage is done. The next morning, Naomi was on the tarmac at Naval Base Point Loma. She had a deployment briefing in 20 minutes. She stood near her Jeep, sipping lukewarm coffee from a dented thermos, the same one she'd carried in Iraq, in Syria, in Djibouti, the same one that had been in her bag yesterday when she got restrained outside a courtroom 2 miles from where she stood now. Admiral Kincaid walked up beside her, hands behind his back. "You good?" Naomi nodded, always. He gave her a look. "No, you're not." She smiled. "Okay, I'm tired." He nodded. "You earned it. That was bigger than I expected." Naomi didn't say anything. Kincaid looked out at the airstrip. "You know, I got calls from 2 federal judges last night. One of them said he watched the video footage, asked if he could send it to a training academy." "Training for what?" she asked. "For learning how to shut up and listen?" Naomi chuckled. He looked at her seriously again. "You did something most people in uniform never do. You spoke up while still in it, took off the armor and said what needed saying." "I wasn't trying to make a statement." "You didn't have to," he said. "You were the statement." They stood in silence for a second, then he said, "I put in for a commendation. Not for your past deployments, for yesterday." Naomi shook her head. "Don't need it." "You don't," he agreed. "But the next girl coming behind you, she might." She turned and looked at him, finally letting herself breathe all the way in. "Sir," she said, "you know what I kept thinking yesterday?" "What's that?" "If I hadn't stood up for myself in that courtroom, I would have been just another woman they wrote off, another file, another face no one remembered." Kincaid nodded. "But now they'll remember." She looked down at her hands. No restraints, just skin, just strength. Back at the courthouse, the bailiff had been reassigned. The judge issued a public statement acknowledging procedural bias. And Naomi, she didn't show up on the news. She didn't post about it, but stories move. People talk, and the video of her standing there in restraints, calm, unshaken, proud, had already started circulating. No hashtags, no press team, just truth. Naomi climbed into her Jeep, started the engine. Kincaid stepped back, gave her a small nod. "Stay sharp out there." She smiled. "Always do." And with that, she pulled off, one wheel in the dirt, the other already rolling back into the work ahead. Because for Naomi Prescott, this wasn't the end of the story. It was just one more page in a book still being written. And maybe, just maybe, someone else would read it. And remember, justice isn't just about what the law says. It's about how people are treated when no one's watching. It's about who speaks up when everyone else stays seated. And it's about how you carry yourself, not just when the world salutes you, but when it handcuffs you too. Because strength isn't just surviving a war. It's surviving the moment when your own country forgets you fought one. If you made it this far, don't let the story stop here. Speak up. Stand with those who are silenced. And if you ever find yourself sitting quietly while someone else gets restrained for showing up, ask yourself, what would Naomi Prescott do?